but let's start talking about some finances. And so I put some statistics in the beginning to kind of show how important this is. And obviously we have a lot of people here today. And so that in itself might be showing how important finances is to everybody now. So statistics that go with this is 80% of people said that money was their number one stressor. So obviously a big thing. We as therapists work a lot with helping people with stress. And so that's one of the reasons why we talk to people about financial stress and anxiety. And so 77% of people feel anxious about their financial situation. And this next statistic might be one of the reasons why, because 70% of people, 7 out of 10, have no savings. And 68% are worried about not having enough money to retire. 57% of people can't come up with $1,000 if they needed to. And so that's kind of scary because they most likely go into debt when they need money like that. And in our world today, there's always going to be things that happen. And so we are going to need some extra money from time to time. 56% of people have no budget. 54% of people are Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And so that's pretty scary. That would cause some anxiety and some stress. So 52% of people have difficulty controlling their money worries. Up to 40% of divorces are caused by financial issues. That's a lot of divorces. And so we really want to work on that and reduce that a good amount. 40% of people are one missed check away from poverty because they're living paycheck to paycheck. 29% of people handle emergencies with credit cards. And we'll talk about credit cards a little bit today. 28% of people don't pay their bills on time. 26% of people 50 and over never expect to retire because of being in debt. So that's kind of a scary one. Only 24% of millennials have basic financial literacy. And so in high school in Utah, where we're at, they do require a financial course. There is states that don't, but we still don't have a lot of education financially. And we're going to talk about some of that today. 21% of people believe winning the lottery is the most viable way to have a retirement fund, which is kind of scary. And then I put on there 113 billion. In America, every year we spend $113 billion on the lottery, which is pretty crazy. And then this one, on average, people carry about $23,000 of debt, which is a lot. So those are just some statistics for us to think about of, why money is scary for people, and there's a lot of anxiety and obviously divorce. And so one of the reasons why we'd like to help you guys out with some financial planning and some financial wellness. So usually whenever I talk to anybody about their financial, they come into me and want to discuss that. I want to talk to them about what their goals are. What are they trying to accomplish? Are they trying to have money for retirement? Are they trying to get out of debt? Are they trying to budget their money more wisely? And so those are important things for you guys to think about is, what do I want to achieve with my money? And, kind of really thinking about this with your spouse, with your family, with yourself, will kind of help you determine where you are, where you want to be, and what you need to do to get there. So financial planning itself isn't going to give you more money, but it's going to help you to use your money in a better way that's going to help you to be more successful. So that's a very important thing for us. So in goals, these are some things to think about. Where do I want to be in a year from now, money-wise, 5 years, 10 years? Try to be specific about what you would like the future to look like. And try to set up some actionable goals for what do I want in the short term, the medium, and the long term of what I'd like my financial situation to look like. And then from there, we can set up little ways of how to get there. Everybody has a little bit different meaning for money. You know, for some people, money can represent power. You know, if you're a parent and you request, you know, your kids have to do chores to get money, you have power over them doing their chores and different things like that. You know, it can be a coping with problems type of situation. We have money to cope with different things. For me, some of the biggest things is, you know, security and freedom and safety. You know, I hopefully am one that does not like to live paycheck to paycheck. I like to have some money set aside, and we're going to talk about that more today. But so that I, you know, can feel safe with my money. And also I can have some freedom to do some things that makes me happy. Every single one of us needs to do things that make us happy, and sometimes money goes with that. So you need to plan for that within your budget to have some freedom to do some things that you're excited about. Security. If I was living, you know, like I said, paycheck to paycheck, that would be very scary for me, and I felt like I'd be less secure in what I'm trying to do. So if we're in a relationship, it's very important to talk about how to manage our money. You know, are we going to share the responsibilities? Are we going to divide them up? How are we going to pay our bills? How are we, you know, how do we budget? What do we do with the money when it comes in? These are very important topics for us to discuss. And so in thinking about that, you know, John Gottman's, you know, probably the most famous marriage therapist researcher out there, has tons of really, really helpful books on couples and everything like that. And he has this technique called the speaker-listener technique. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that. And you can use this to talk about anything, including money. So when we talk about this, there's rules that go with it. And the biggest thing that I'd want you to understand is I want you guys to think, before I give my thoughts or my suggestions, I need to truly understand the other person's point of view, and to be able to for them to be able to say that I totally understand their point of view, and to some extent care about their point of view. And so that's what the speaker-listener technique sets up. So in thinking about this, there's obviously a speaker and there's a listener. The speaker has the floor to talk about how they feel about money or some of the problems that are going on or the stresses that are happening. And so the speaker talks, they talk about themselves. Usually they can use I feel statements are beneficial, and they don't feel as much of a criticism. And they probably don't want to talk for 20 to 25 minutes because the other person isn't going to be able to really remember all of the things and be able to respond. So it's good to kind of break some of the things up and kind of talk in some small chunks. So the speaker talks. The listener, their goal is to help them to feel comfortable in what they're saying. They can ask questions. Usually they're open-ended questions about trying to understand what the speaker is saying. They will paraphrase what they heard the speaker say, and they should have some empathy about what they said. Empathy doesn't mean that they agree with them. It just means that I heard you say this, and if I was in your spot, I could see where that would be difficult for you. It doesn't mean I agree with you, but I could see how that might be hard. So that's what the speaker and the listener are doing. Once the speaker's done talking and the listener has paraphrased and used some empathy, then they switch roles. And now the listener is the speaker and they talk about their side. And the speaker that was the speaker before is now the listener, and they're listening, helping them to feel comfortable, you know, actively listening to what they're saying, paraphrasing it, using some empathy. Once they're done, then they can discuss, once they both have a really good understanding, then they can discuss any compromises that might need to be made. But we can't make any compromises. We can't solve anything until we both understand each other's opinions and each other's side. So that's how Gottman would talk about the speaker listener and working through different types of money issues. So that's a good idea. You can use with your kids. Obviously you're going to have to set up how to do it. You can easily use with your significant others, parents. So Gottman would say that, there's a lot of times that problems, they don't really have an answer to them. And so they're kind of these gridlock problems. He'd say 69% of problems that we have, there's no real clear answer to them. So he's kind of come up with this dialogue that he thinks can help people to understand it and ask questions that can be helpful. So his thought with this is kind of a dreams within conflict. He believes that there's no real answer because there's usually a dream behind the situation, this gridlock problem that's happening. So these questions can be really helpful to get more at the dream of what the person has. So if we think about this with money or financials, it's, the speaker, the listener would ask these questions and the speaker would answer them. So the first one, do you have any core beliefs, ethics, or values that are a part of your position on this issue? So maybe your core belief is we need to have some money in the bank in case there was an emergency, or we need to save some money for retirement, or I don't want to use credit cards or be in debt to solve our problems. And so those are just some things to think about. Is there a story behind this for you? Sometimes we see things as children from our parents, and then we think, well, that's the way money is going to go in my relationship. Or, well, I'm going to do the total opposite of that. I saw my parents go through a bankruptcy, or I had, they were always in credit card debt, or they're always fighting about money. And that's not going to be in my relationship. And so that's a really important thing for them to stay out of debt or to not even bring up a bankruptcy or whatever it is. Tell me why this is important to you is the third question. The fourth one, what feelings do you have about this issue? And so you ask these 9 questions, the listener asks them to the speaker answers them to the best of their ability, and then they switch and do the same thing again. And then you ask the other person, their answers to these 9 questions. And usually there's a topic that goes with it, like, why are you so afraid of credit cards? Or why do you want to have money in retirement? Something that we keep running up against that we're kind of having this gridlock problem with. And so that's kind of how this dreams within conflict goes. And so, like I said, if any of you guys, for one, Heather's going to send this PowerPoint to you, with this recording, I guess. And so you'll be able to pause it and see those questions from that. But if you did want those questions, you can send it to me also, and I can send this PowerPoint over to you. So that's kind of how the speaker, listener, and dreams within conflict. So this is just how to talk about different financial things together. One of the most important things you can do. So if we're targeting just towards money, let's talk about some tips that kind of go with that. So make time to talk about your finances regularly. If this is a real problem that you guys are having, then weekly or monthly would be a really good idea. If it's something that's, we're doing pretty well and we got a pretty good understanding, we got a good foundation, then maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's once a year that you should talk about it. My wife and I, we usually talk about it every quarter. So after every 3-month period, I'll, find out what our net worth is and what we're doing well with and what we might not be doing well with. And I bring out those numbers and we sit down and talk about it. For some people, that might not sound like the most exciting thing to do, but if you can do it in your relationships, after some time, that turns into a really exciting conversation, because then we have this extra money, and what vacations do we want to be doing? What do we want to do for our kids? We talk about these exciting things that happen because we learn how to manage our money and get on the same page a little bit better. So in the beginning, might not be that exciting, but in the future, those can be fantastic conversations and get you on the same page and be really successful. Some of those, the Gottman stuff that we talked about is helping to identify some of the differences and maybe some different ways that we can work together on that. Both partners should know about what you're doing financially and where you're at. You know, if, for instance, if somebody gets in a car crash on the way to work, you know, say the wife, she's the one that does all the finances and pays all the bills and does all the budgeting, and husband has no idea what's really going on with that. If she gets in an accident and for some reason no longer can, you know, talk about that information, then husband needs to know where that information is and needs to know how to get to that. That's one reason why both partners need to be involved. Another reason is, you know, you guys are a team figuring out this together. And so you need to, for one, divide up some tasks if that's something that's interesting. But two, you both need to have a really good idea of where your money's going, what we're saving for, what our goals are. That's just going to help you guys to do this a lot more successfully. We want to be honest with our family about our money situations. And I'm not saying you have to tell your extended family or, you know, really young kids what's going on, but for sure your significant other, you guys probably should never be doing a big purchase without the other person knowing about it. We probably shouldn't be buying any houses or trucks or cars or setting up this huge vacation without talking about it with our spouse first, or, you know, somebody that we're, you know, going to work together with on that. It's okay to have differences and to respect these differences. Gottman would say what helps with these differences is having some humor and some affection. You know, even though we have a difference and we've talked about it and we've communicated clearly about it, it's okay that these are a part of our relationship and we can look for ways to be successful with them. You know, setting goals together, that meeting that we talked about, you know, meeting regularly and setting goals that are important to you, whether that's saving money, whether that's paying off debt, whether that's having money for vacations or doing things with kids. It's important for us to talk about money decisions with our kids as they grow up and as they mature. There's a lot of great things that we can do with them, and we can help them to be successful going forward. And so if there's appropriate things we can talk about with kids, let's do it. Let's talk about debt. Let's talk about saving for retirement. Let's talk about the stock market. Let's talk about those things with kids. I remember growing up, I didn't talk much, you know, my parents didn't talk much about those things with me. And I think we'd be a lot more successful as parents and helping the future generations if we are talking about those a little bit more. Talked about that large purchases one. This using curiosity and kindness is one of the most important things that we can do in all aspects of communication, but especially when we disagree. How can we be curious about the other person's point of view and have some kindness when it's a little bit different than ours? Sometimes in relationships, we bring in financial problems and, you know, maybe somebody's, you know, has a really high, you know, maybe they're in debt. They took out some student loans or they got in a car crash or whatever it is. And so rather than looking for, you know, ways to blame each other for the financial problems that we're in, let's look for opportunities to solve these problems together. We can't solve them until we understand them. And that's where we go back to really discussing them and kind of working through them a little bit. So that's kind of some parts to go with that. So every financial plan should be flexible. You know, it should change as your situation changes, as your life changes. You know, right now, my wife is working in a job that she can retire in 3 years. And she'll have a pension, but that's going to cut her pay in half. And so at that time, we're going to have to talk about that for sure beforehand. But in that moment, our plan's going to need to be flexible and some things might need to change a little bit. We want our plan to be liquid. And so if we only have money in retirement and we're still 40 years old, we still have about 20 years until we can get to that money. And so we need to have some money that's liquid. And we're going to talk about some ideas from some experts about how to do that. You know, this protective, so we should be able to meet some unexpected large expenses without difficulties. We're going to talk about where we would get that from, but that usually that could be from some emergency fund type of idea. We want our plan to be tax friendly. Taxes are the biggest thing, that the most money we're ever going to pay is to taxes. And we want to pay all of the money that we're supposed to pay to the government, but we don't want to pay any more than we have to. And so we want our financial plan to be pretty tax friendly. And we're going to talk about the steps to make that happen. So this goes into a little bit more of revising that plan if we need to, because goals change. We want to review this plan at least every year. It doesn't mean we need to change the plan every year, but we want to meet and discuss, does this plan still make sense with where we're at? You know, is it still matching our goals? And remember, you know, this isn't etched in stone. You know, it's not like the 10 Commandments. We can still change it. And so it's written on paper. We can change the plan. One of the reasons why we got to be talking about it. So Susie Orman, you guys maybe have heard of her before. She's a famous financial person. She says, true financial freedom doesn't depend on how much money you have. Financial freedom is when you have power over your fears and anxieties instead of the other way around. So money, finances is just a tool. It's not the goal. It's not the destination. It's a tool to reduce some of our fears and anxieties and help us to have freedom and to do the things that makes us happy. That's what money's for, is to help us to be able to live a life that we feel good about, not the ending destination of our lives. Let's talk about paying off debt a little bit. You know, that's one of the big things we run into when we're talking about finances with people, is people are in debt. Let's talk about the two most famous ways to get out of debt. Budgeting is very much a part of that. But how people get out of debt are these two ways. So the snowball approach or the avalanche. So the snowball, a lot of people have heard about that. Dave Ramsey has made that pretty famous, and probably some others. But what you do is you find out, you put on a piece of paper all of the debts you have, and you write down how much you owe on each debt and what is the interest rate on both debts, on all of the debts that you have. So then you would pay the minimum on every debt, but the debt that you have, say you have $200 on a credit card, and that was the lowest debt you had, you would focus on paying off that one first. So you'd pay the minimum, and then any extra money you had, you would put onto that debt that's only $200. Once that one's paid off, you continue to pay the minimum on all the debts, and then the second one that has the lowest amount of money, say it's $500, then you put as much as you can onto that $500 debt until they're all paid off. So it's like a snowball rolling down the mountain, building up steam and paying off your debt. So that's the snowball approach. The avalanche is kind of similar, where you want to write down how much you owe and the interest rate. But the avalanche focuses on the interest rate. And so like a credit card, sadly, can have 20 and over % that you might owe on it. But maybe your car or your student loans could be 4 or 5%. And so with those ones, the avalanche would say you want to pay off the one with the highest interest rate first. So you pay the minimums, just like you would with the snowball, and then the one with the highest interest rate, you pay that one first. And so overall, the avalanche one's going to save you more money, but the snowball is psychologically a little easier for people to understand and to be maybe more successful with. You have to know you and pick the one that helps you the most. So if paying off a debt and moving on to the next one feels better, then the snowball approach is for you. If you're thinking, well, how do I save the most money? Then the avalanche is the better approach for you. And so usually if people are struggling with debt, snowball is probably easiest. I think that's why Dave Ramsey picks that one the most. That's kind of how both of those work. Developing a budget is really important, a huge step with that. This is kind of budgeting in the old way. You know, we get paid, we start thinking about our expenses, the bills we have to pay, our credit cards, our house, all of these different things. And so then we would, you know, use that. And then if we had anything extra, we would put it into savings. And that's not the best way to do it. I'll show you a little bit better way. So we get paid, and then we automatically have some money coming out. Hopefully it's automated. So the bank does it just by itself. You know, that takes out a little bit of money for savings and for investing. And then we pay our expenses. And then if we have any extra money, we could put it in savings or use it for fun or whatever it is. In that paying yourself, you can also have some of that used for fun. Remember, any good budget will have money coming out for fun, for things for you to do that you enjoy. So here's some reasons why we might pay ourselves first. You know, mentally, we're putting ourselves as a priority, that we're more, you know, we're more important than the electric company, than our house. We obviously have to pay those bills. And so once we budget and come up with how much extra, then we can start saving some extra rather than just letting it go to things that maybe aren't that important to us. Like we talked about, you know, people used to, you know, the bills, they pay bills, then it's fun, and then savings. You're not going to save a lot that way, you know, and so the better way to be able to make it so you're financially successful is we have some money go to savings, then we pay some bills, and then we use some for the extra for fun. Like I tell you, I want any good budget has fun involved, and I want that to be a part of your budget. It's a very important part. It's not the only part. We also have to make sure we're paying our bills and saving for the future. It also is building a buffer for the future. And so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more, and how some experts do that. A great budgeting resource, you know, this is a picture of Dave Ramsey and his daughter, Rachel Cruz. Dave Ramsey has a lot of fantastic free resources if you get on his website. He has a free app that's called Every Dollar app. There's a paid version, but there's also a free version that you can budget on an app for free. There's tons of other resources available too on tons of websites that you can have free spreadsheets or free apps. And there's also paid ones that can be really, really beneficial. But if you go on to Dave Ramsey's website, there's going to be a tab for budgeting, and Rachel Cruz will walk you through how to set up a great budget in 5 minutes. It's a little YouTube video. You know, this is the link to be able to do that, but they have a lot of really, really good information about budgeting, if that's something that's important to you. So these guys I like a lot. So these are the Money Guy. This is the Money Guy show. And they have a podcast. They have a YouTube video. Brian Preston's the guy on the left with his thumbs up. And he just came out with a fantastic book called The Millionaire Mission. And this is called The Financial Order of Operations. I've told you we'd talk about this a little bit. But this is their idea of what you should do with the money that you get, the extra money that you've had after you've paid your bills. And so they want you to, first thing is they want you to have your deductibles covered. We're going to talk about Dave Ramsey and how he's a little bit different next. But they want you to have your highest deductible covered. So that's usually, you know, maybe on your house or your health insurance, that might be $1,400, $1,500. that they would like you just to have sitting in the bank to cover any deductible if you have to go to the hospital or something happens with your house or your car, so that you don't have to go into debt when one of those things does happen. Not if it happens, but when it happens. That money, you could have, I'd say, two really good places to put that. You could either put that just in your local bank or your credit union that you have, or you could put it in a high yield savings account. The deductibles, I usually just have in my bank because I want to be able to get to it that second if I needed it. So then the second thing would be your employer match in your 401k or your Roth 401k. They say that's the second thing because that's free money that your job is trying to give you. So if you have a 3% match of the total money that you earn in a year, maybe that's $2,000. You want to make sure you're putting in $2,000 because your job is giving you $2,000 for free. And so that's just extra money that you get. These guys, the money guys, these, experts on money, like I said, they're financial planners and have been doing this for years. They would say once you get your match in your 401k, they want you to move to your next step, but they want you to get that free money. You can't go backwards and get that free money from years ago. So they want you to get that free money even before you pay off high interest debt, which leads us to the third one. So high interest debt. So that's going to be your credit cards. That's going to be car payments. That's going to be student loans sometimes, depending on what the debt is with that. But that is not your house. So that's a little difference from, what you'll see with Dave Ramsey. The money guys don't consider your house as a high interest debt. There's a lot of people that have debts on their house. Their interest rate might be under 3 or 4% right now. And so that's a very low interest debt. So they don't count that. There's a different spot that's actually in stage 9, where they want you to pay off your low interest debt. So they don't want you to really start paying off your house until you're in, 8 or 9 step. So that's where they are with that, with those high interest. And they would say you could use the debt snowball or the avalanche, whichever one you like the most at that time. And then they move into emergency reserves. So their idea with that is they want you to have 3 to 6 months of emergency reserves. And so 3 to 6 months of how much money you pay for bills, how much money you would need to live. So say that's $2,000 that you would need in a month to pay off the bills and to have enough money to live if for some reason you lost your job or something big happened where you needed that emergency reserve. So 3 to 6 months of $2,000, 3 months would be $6,000 they would want you to have just sitting in a bank account. And this is one that I would say I'd want it to be in a high yield savings account where you can earn a higher interest rate. You can get about 5% right now in those high yield savings accounts. So just having that money sitting there, and then when you need it, you can transfer it back to your bank or your credit union really, really easily. There's some great ones out there. There's SoFi, there's Ally Bank, there's Capital One, there's Wealthfront. Those are different, these high yield savings accounts. I'll just go to step 5 for them and tell you about this one. Step 5 is another investing one. And so when you get to step 5, they'd want you to start doing a Roth IRA. And so Roth IRAs, they have a limit that the government puts on them about how much money you can put in. You can put in this year, you can put in $7,000 in that. You can put it in for both spouses. Even if one is a stay-at-home mom or husband, then they still can have a Roth IRA if husband or wife is working. But you can put in $7,000 into those. And that's for this year. And then next year, you'll be able to put in another $7,000. that money goes up with inflation. So last year it was $6,500 that you could put in. So there's that. And then your HSA is a fantastic account. Most people just use that for medical things. You can invest your HSA. And so that's the HSA, you can have some tax savings in the beginning and then even in the end. I'll briefly tell you what's the difference between like a 401k and a Roth IRA. So 401k, you don't pay taxes now, but you will pay them in the future when you take your money out. So at your job, you have a 401k, you don't pay taxes right now, but you will pay taxes. Say it gets to $1 million when you start taking out in the future, you'll pay taxes then. A Roth IRA is different. It's the opposite. You pay taxes when you get a paycheck, and then you can put it into your Roth IRA. And then when you take it out in the future, you won't pay any taxes on it. And so most times the money guys would say, if you're in a lower tax bracket, so you're paying less than 30% on your taxes, they would say a Roth IRA is the way you should go, or a Roth 401k. But if you pay more than 30%, then it might be a good idea to do a 401k, the traditional kind, because you have a big savings right then. So those are the 5 steps I wanted to go over with you. Obviously, you could meet with me or a financial planner or even a therapist that might be able to talk about these extra steps on that one. But those 5 steps is a great, great start for people. I'm going to pull up the chat. I see that there's been some people talking to see if there's any questions maybe I should quickly talk about.
Yeah, there's a couple. Sorry, I was waiting until you're done with that slide.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
one of them was asking when they should introduce savings for their kids,
Yeah,
or
great
budgeting, I should
question.
say.
Yeah, I would talk to them early. As soon as you, and obviously it's going to be different how you talk to them. I have almost a 4-year-old. When we go to the store, I can start talking to her about how much things cost and why dad goes to work. And she can have a little piggy bank and we can put money in there. And she probably at 4 doesn't have to use her money. She could to buy things, but we can talk about some of that's happening. And then slowly as they start getting older, then we can start talking about a little bit more. When your kids are actually making money, then they can have Roth IRAs themselves. If they're 5 and they're selling lemonade and making money doing that, you can open a Roth IRA for them and you can put in however much money they earn. So if they earn $10, then you'd be eligible to put in $10 into a Roth IRA. There's a lot of great accounts for kids. There's a 529 that is for education, that's going to have a lot of really good tax benefits. And then you can put it in the Roth IRA in the future if you don't use that money. Those are things for you guys to start looking into or to ask some people about. We probably don't have a ton of time to go into all those, but there's 3 or 4 really great accounts for kids. But I would talk to them right away. Once you start getting into kids that are teenagers and working, let's talk to them about savings and investing and even giving money to causes or to others. And so those are important things. Any other good questions, Heather, for me to talk about right now?
Okay, and then someone asked what a 403B is.
Yeah, good question. A lot of those are going to be very similar to like a 401k. Like my wife has another one that's called a 457. Most of them are similar to 401ks. There's just going to be a little bit of difference. It's usually not even how they're taxed. It's just different companies, different nonprofits, and different things can be set up that way. Those would be a good thing to Google is, you could Google differences between a 401k and a 403b. There's not going to be a lot. Usually it's how they're taxed. Like a 457, those ones, you just like a 401k, but you can take them out once you retire and you can use that money right away without it being taxed. Usually on a 401k, you have to wait till you're of retirement age. So 59 and a half or older. So good question.
And then someone asks, they said, sorry, Roths don't grow in interest. Is that correct?
No, Roths very much grow in interest. Roths are going to be, they're a fantastic account because if it's a Roth IRA, you have, total control over it. If it's at your job through a Roth 401k, then your job will provide accounts that you can put money into. They're usually going to be mutual funds or index funds or exchange traded funds. Those are just baskets of stocks. But a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, they grow with the stock market. And we'll talk a little bit more about the stock market, but they very much go up. One scary thing with a Roth is, in any account, is you have to pick what you're going to put your money into. So if you just have money going into the account, it's not being put into the stock market. You actually have to buy stuff with it. So make sure you don't just have it going to and sitting there like a savings account. It actually has to be invested. So, but yeah, it very much goes up.
Okay, and then the last question we have so far is, how do you know what percent of taxes you're paying, like the tax bracket you're in? She said,
Yeah.
a little bit embarrassing, but we'll had to
No,
ask. And I don't think
no,
that's embarrassing at all.
not embarrassing at all. Great question. You can ask that, you can Google that. And that would be, like I said, just Google what tax bracket am I in, and it will tell you. Usually a lot of people, depending, it it like 22, 24, 26% is probably the normal tax brackets for most people. To be in the 30, you have to be making, I think it's over $500,000 a year. So it's a lot. But yeah, just Google that and just say, hey, what tax bracket am I in? That will show the federal. And then you can put in Utah's, if you're in Utah, Utah's tax, and that's usually, I think it's like 6.5%. I could be wrong on that, but it's close to that. So, but yeah, so look into that, and they'll show you for people filing, singly or filing jointly, there's a different tax percentage that you would be in for that. So we could do whole presentations just on taxes. But I wanted to briefly show you, Dave Ramsey and some of his. So his is the baby steps. There's a lot of similarities, but some differences to the money guy. He wants you to have $1,000 in that emergency fund. That's similar to the deductibles type of thing, but Dave Ramsey puts a number on it for you. And then he wants you to pay off all debt using the snowball approach, except for your house. So he doesn't want you to invest in your 401k before you pay off debt. Where the money guy, they want you to get that free money before you start paying off your debt. And then the 3 to 6 months is the same. He wants you to invest 15% of your household income in retirement. He wants it in those things like we talked about, the 401k or the Roth IRA. Then he wants you to start saving, and these are steps. So once you're doing the 15%, he wants you to move to the child college fund, that 529. Then he wants you to pay off your home. Then he wants you to invest even more money when you get to that later step and give money. The money guys are a little bit different than that in that they want you, and Dave Ramsey would probably say this too, he wants you to give at all times, whether it's your time or your money, however that you can do that. So those are some differences. If you're interested in those two ways of thinking, like I tell you, they both have lots of resources that are free on their websites. They both have podcasts and books that can be really helpful for people. So a couple tips for you guys. Creating specific funds. Remember, I told you I want you to be doing fun things. You can create specific funds that are for holidays or vacations or anniversaries, And so every time you get paid, maybe you have $25 that just comes out and is being put into a holiday fund or a vacation fund or something like that. We talked that you want to make sure to tell significant others and friends and, try to support each other. Let's talk about credit cards just for a minute. Credit cards, Dave Ramsey hates credit cards and won't do credit cards. Money guys believe in credit cards and think they're a good thing if you pay them off every month. If you go into debt using a credit card and you cannot pay it off at the end of the month, then they would say you should never have a credit card. And so credit card debt is a big, big no-no. Debt in general can be a significant issue for us. And so they would say that debt's like a chainsaw. Chainsaws are great for cutting down trees, but you have to be really, really careful with a chainsaw because you can really hurt yourself. There's a reason why there's a chainsaw at all of the, the haunted houses that we go to. They're very scary. And so debt should be very scary to you. You shouldn't take on debt unless you know that you're going to pay it off. But say you have a Costco credit card and you buy your things on, on that credit card. So you get, 3% back on gas and 4% back on the things you buy from Costco, and you pay it off every month. Making $600 at the end of the year is a fantastic thing as long as you never go into debt. So that's something to think about. Be careful with like air miles and gas cards for the same reason that they're trying to give you those things so that you'll go into debt. If you can have those credit cards and not go into debt, those are great things. There's many people that use that and use it very well. You need to know yourself, if you go into debt and can't pay it off, be very, very careful with credit cards. If you can pay them off, credit cards can be an okay thing for you. Couple stock market things for you. This is, kind of what your Roth IRA and your 401k and even like a normal brokerage account would be invested in. On the left, you can look at the wealth multiplier. That's a Money Guy document. You can get on their website and you can download this for free. But say you're 30 years old. So if you go over there and look at that one there on the left, if you're 30 years old, every dollar that you're putting in your Roth IRA or your 401k has the potential to turn into $23. And so that's just $1 by the time you're 65 could turn into 23. So just imagine if you're putting in, consistently putting in the amount of money into the stock market. So if you're 30 and want to become a millionaire by 65, all you have to do is put in $340 a month into your Roth IRA or your 401k. And so that doesn't seem like a ton of money. If you started at 20, hence why we want to talk to our kids about how to do this, you'd only have to put in $95 a month until you were 65 to become a millionaire. Pretty crazy how that changes. If you wait till you're 50, $1 only turns into $2.85, which is a lot better than $1, but is nowhere close to $85 when you were 20. So that's why the money guys would say they want you to get that free money right away. That's kind of some of their thought with that. The document on the right shows you what the stock market has done every year for the last 100 years. So the highest positive year, 1954, was up 73%, and the average is 10% per year. As you can see, the stock market doesn't go up 10% every year, but overall, it's gone up 10% for the last 100 years. So the stock market is a fantastic way to be investing your money. There's years that are down. 2008 was down, what is that? I can't see the bottom number, but it's 30 to 40%, I believe. But then obviously you can see a lot more of those, I guess it's light turquoise years over there. So that's just kind of what the stock market's doing. Some quick stock market things for you. What do you need to know about the stock market? To be successful with it, you don't need to know a lot. You know, I talked about those index funds. You can buy index funds that can be the whole stock market, so every stock, or another one that I would suggest that's a really good one is called the S&P 500. It's the top 500 companies in the United States. Just while you're listening to these answers, on the right side tells you what percent the stock market has gone up or gone down every year. Obviously, the green is when it's gone up and the red's when it's gone down. So when is the best time to invest? It was yesterday. The next best time to invest is today. And so getting started, as you can see from, the years on how much, by how old you are, how much your money has a chance to grow. So where should I invest? Like we talked about, you should start with your 401k, your Roth 401k, or then your Roth IRA would be next. What should I invest in? The money guys, which I like a lot, as you guys are hearing, they would do what's called a target date fund. And so what that is that has a basket of stocks, but then it also has bonds in it. So all you need to know is when I need this money in retirement and how much I can put in. You don't need to know anything else about the stock market. Those other two that I talked about are really great, the total stock market or an S&P 500. So that's not necessarily stock advice. I'd want you to look into that and see what you think, but those are some really good options that a lot of people do. Should I invest in individual stocks or crypto like Bitcoin and things like that? Most likely, if you don't know a lot about the stock market, I would say no, because to some extent that can make the stock market a little harder and is a little bit more like gambling. And so Warren Buffett would tell you that it's a huge percentage. I think it might be 99% of people should just buy the S&P 500 and call it a day. And so that's what most people should do. How much should I invest? Dave Ramsey said 15% of your income. The money guys would say 20 to 25% would be great to replace everything. Do I need a financial planner? Most likely no. Because financial planners cost a lot of money, even if they sound pretty cheap and say, hey, we only take 1%, 1% adds up to, after 30 years, can add up to over $500,000. And so ultimately, you might need a financial planner when it's later in life or in the very, very beginning to step things up if you're really unsure. But I would tell you, pay one that is a fee only, that you're just going to pay for meeting with them for the couple hours that you meet with them, and you can set up a plan that you can just follow through with. Or when you're getting close to retirement, to set up that plan rather than, one that's going to take a fee, even like I said, a small percentage, even like a percentage, 1%. So those are some ideas for you guys. I know we have a lot of comments and not a lot of time. Anything, Heather, that you saw that you'd like me to get to?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions. So I was just going to say that it's 1 o'clock, so it is over, but I'll ask all these questions and then I'll keep it in the recording. So if you guys have to go, you can watch it later. All right. So the first one was, so if my medical deductible is $7,000 per year for my family, would I save all of that up before I paid off debt? And then I would use that instead of my HSA card for medical expenses?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a pretty high medical deductible, and so some people have these high yields, HSAs. So with that, usually that's probably not your deductible. It's probably when I was just with, what was it, Draper City, and they were showing their high deductible, and it was $1,500 to $1,600. I would look into that a little bit more, because it's probably a little bit less than that. If it was that much, then I might go with the next one. And just as you're building that up, as you're paying down debt, and then move to your next step of that emergency fund, I would use that along with your emergency fund. So those two kind of go together, but I would look into that a little bit more. Because like I said, that sounds pretty high to me.
Okay, I can't see the question now, but I know someone asked in here if they make an appointment, will the therapist help them figure out what stocks to do and stuff? And I'll let you answer that, Justin.
Yeah. So we aren't financial planners, and
This is Sage.
so yeah, so we aren't financial planners. So with that, individual stocks, no. Like I tell you, if you listen to the money guys, they would say, hey, I don't know your specific, all of your information, but they would tell you to look into a target date fund. Some of your like 401ks won't have a target date fund. So you could look into, like I said, like an S&P 500 or maybe even a total stock market. That's what I would recommend. I would never recommend any individual stocks to you, or Bitcoin or anything else like that. Even though those things could go up really great, you would want, like I said, a recommendation from us. If you want more advice than that, you would want to meet with a certified financial planner to talk about stocks. But like I said, if you did that, I would want you to meet with a fiduciary, one that has to act in your best interests, and then also one that you just pay a fee to rather than a percentage over time.
Okay, and then the next one is, how do you build your credit score without using credit cards?
Great question. A lot of these questions we could spend an hour talking about just in itself. I would tell you that it would be a good way to Google that. If you Google that, that's going to come up with the 5 or 6 different things that they look at. A lot of them have to do with credit and paying off your bills. Like I told you, Dave Ramsey is a big fan of not having credit cards, and he'll talk about how you build up credit. It's not as easy without a credit card, for sure. Like I said, the money guys are the opposite of that. They would want you to use a credit card, but would want you to be very smart with a credit card. But just put that in a Google search. It'll bring up, the different ways. A lot of it is, paying your bills on time. A lot of it will be credit cards, and, how much, possibility, I guess, what's your credit limit is the way to say that. And so those are a few of them, but there are a few more.
Okay, I'm just going to try to go through these fast. So someone said, say you have 5 credit cards with balances. Is it best to keep the cards open once you've paid them off, or does it hurt your credit if you close them?
Good question. That goes along with the credit that they're saying. It does hurt your credit when you close them, especially your longest one. So if you have a long one and you pay it off, what I would tell you to do is occasionally buy gas with it and pay it off. And you'd only have to do that maybe a couple times a year to keep it open. If you do nothing with it for a while, then it will go away, and that will affect your credit. If you have 5 and that's overwhelming to you, it's probably okay for you to let a couple of them close after they're paid off, and so that you can manage it a little bit more with 3 or whatever. To me, that's probably more important than credit, if you're able to manage it and not get over your head in that.
Okay, and then we have tons of comments going back and forth of people just talking about stuff, which is great. The last question I see is, how do I even use the stock market? How do I put money into something? And it said you might be going over this already, but they just didn't know where to start.
Yeah, great question. So where, would be, so the first thing would be your 401k with your job. So if your job offers a 401k and they match, that would be it. And there's HR people or there's financial people at your work that you could ask about. So that would be the first place to do it. If the second place would be that Roth IRA. You can open those at Fidelity was a great one. Vanguard's fantastic. Charles Schwab. Those are the 3 biggest ones. You can open them there. They can help you to do it also, and to think about what you should pick. But remember, you don't want to pick individual stocks. You want to pick those global baskets like an index fund. Remember, the money guys would say a target date fund where you just say, hey, I'm going to retire in 2065. So I pick that one. And with that, in the beginning, it will buy stocks in the beginning and a tiny bit of bonds. And as you get closer to retirement, it will buy more bonds and a little less stocks. And then you're able to balance out. If you don't have that available, a target date fund, remember, a S&P 500 that buys the top 500 companies, and then say Apple goes out of business for some crazy reason, it would kick them out and it would put the next best one in and you wouldn't have to do anything. So those are the things I'd want you to look at. Look at your 401k at your job, start to research a Roth IRA, come talk to me, talk to a financial planner if those are things you're interested in. But there's a lot of great resources out there, whether it's Dave Ramsey or the money guys that can help you with that.